Might help if I take off the mic. What's up, everybody, and welcome to ESO Daily. I am your host, Mystic Raven. All right, guys, so I'm on the PTS going over a bunch of stuff with the new patch notes. But yesterday, I did a daily, and I said I would get into how critical damage is affected by diminishing returns. So I did something completely crazy and stupid. I mean, I guess it's not stupid, but what I did was put on as much crit as possible. I grabbed a Nightblade Khajiit, except there is one kind of bug going on. I don't know if the devs will be watching, but I can't seem to pick up the last passive, so I'm missing 5% on this last passive. I'm already scaled up to 660, but it says I need to be 50, but I'm already 50. But whatever, I'm losing 5% crit because of this bug. Keep that in mind. But what I ended up doing is I went into and I put a Leviathan on. Actually, I'm missing a piece still. Hold on. Oh, probably the bow or something stupid. No, got that. Feet. Yeah, so anyways. So what I did was put on Leviathan along with Night Mothers. The reason I did this, because I wanted a lot of crit, right? I wanted to go complete crit. Night Mothers gives me that. Night Mothers gives me 2 crits, weapon damage, right? And I don't really care about DPS or anything. I'm not trying to do any of that. I'm trying to show you guys how crit will affect base damage if you stack too much crit. And that's what ends up happening. The golden rule in MMOs, and this is the golden rule. This is number 1 rule with diminishing returns. The first thing diminishing returns is always going to affect, every MMO, slightly different, is how it affects critical damage. Number 1, it is the golden rule. If there's no other reason that you should pay attention to diminishing returns, it's for crit value, right? It's crit value specifically. Number 1, it's been that way for so many years now. I can't even, because once upon a time, their diminishing returns didn't affect critical as much as it probably should have. And people were just increasing base damage, increasing their critical damage, and just literally 1 or 2-shotting people without a flinch, without even having to try. Later on, if you guys see to the right, I'm learning shit. I just started popping. I just made this tune. So the system's still trying to play catch up. But so the devs wanted to balance this out. They introduced a diminishing effect to critical. It's been that way in so many MMOs across the board. It's unbelievable. Okay, it's lesson learned, so to speak, that you have to put a diminishing effect on critical. And in this game, what that does is it takes away from the base value when you stack crit. So you can crit probably 100% of the time, right? You can crit probably 100% of the time, but your crit value is so shit and so low that it's almost unbearable. And I will show you the tooltips and get into this. But what we end up having, I should keep this in mind at the moment. Currently, my crit value is only at 88.7. Okay, and there's a reason I'm going to show you this. Okay, because what I'm doing here is I've got the daggers. Now, if I switch to the dagger side, because the daggers gives me the increase, I'm jumping up to 91.7, right? Keep in mind I'm losing that 5% for the Khajiit's passive. So that would even be higher. But this is at 91.7, guys. What ends up happening, if you take a look, I'm running all precise intentionally. So I have the daggers, precise. I have the bow, precise. Only thing I didn't put on, I put on the crag just for penetration. I'm messing around. But so I got my crit up there. Now what I want to do next is go into the champion system to show you guys something. When we take a look at precise strikes, the way it reads is it increases the damage and healing of your critical strikes with stamina abilities. But it would say increase the damage. But this is kind of wrong. What precise strikes really does is it more or less acts like the thief in the essence of increasing your critical rating. It doesn't increase the damage. Critical rating doesn't increase damage. It increases your chance to crit. And the more frequently you crit, the more damage you deal. That's if your base damage is considerable. So what we end up wanting to do, I'm going to take into effect that we have diminishing returns, but I just want to stack it all because this still goes up to 25. This has not been modified even since Morrowind. So we could still go 25 into precise strikes, right? Okay, I'm going to confirm it. Now I'm going to go back into my character sheet. Now you see my critical rating jump from 91 to 103. Right? It doesn't increase the base damage. It increases my chance to crit. So it's basically acting like the thief. So with all divines on, I can get the 3007 from that critical rating, right? And given in fact the champion points, we can even scale our critical chance even higher. So this is a modifier that's used to increase your critical chance. Not really increase the damage, but increase your chance to critically hit. All right, so just wanted to go over that and how that applies. Okay, now the next thing that you want to ask yourself, well, that seems like a good thing, Mystic. Not really, because when I go into the tooltip, right, and tooltips are very, very useful. We take a look here, and now my Flying Blade deals 4,710 physical damage, right? But I can get this higher, thus increasing the chance to increase the base damage. If I'm stacking crit, what I'm losing in return is the base amount of damage that I can deal. The crit will hit higher, but what I'm going to be losing is that effect. So I can go ahead and keep spamming this. Get that major brutality, crit all the time, right? And that's the base. So when I take a look at the metrics, what I'm actually seeing, now hold on here. Right there, okay, reset. So my critical is 100%, right over here. So we see the 100% crit value. We see the low end DPS and the average. Okay, so the average is 6395, right? So once that major brutality is applied, that's the max that I'm going to be able to do with that. Okay, but I can actually get it to go higher, right? I can do that. So all I have to do is go into the champion points and I can readjust those values. So if I go ahead and let's say I bring this down to about 23%, right? And then I want to increase the base damage. Okay. Now we see increase for the base amount. Now, the major thing to keep in mind, guys, are there are different variables to take into consideration. Now, this is the max that it can do, but the penetrating value also has to be present. So, basically, what I want to do is see if I can get a base. But having too much crit, you don't know if you're hitting 100% penetration as well, because you're always critting. You're never going to see that 5-3. So, one of the major things that you want to do is make sure it's just like this. You're increasing. Now we're up to 7-2. Okay. Right? So we have a 7-2. Right? That's what still at 103% critical. What you can also end up doing is switching out the sets to increase the base amount of damage. So Leviathan's giving us a shitload of crit. Matter of fact, it's maybe too much, because what I ended up also doing was putting on the Camouflage Hunter for the major savagery. Now, along with the Nightblade, now here's the thing I always tell people in trials. I always prefer having at least one Nightblade and one Sorcerer in vet trials. Why? Because it's very simple. They each have a passive that increases the critical for the minor savagery and the minor prophecy that increases critical damages. This is important, guys. So when you're saying, oh, well, my critical value is only at 60, I like to keep around between 55 to 60, knowing I can increase my base damage and knowing when I'm in a trial. If there's a Nightblade, if I'm a stam user and Nightblade's a present, I'm going to get the minor savagery applied when they do critical damage. Same thing with the sorcerer. I'm going to get the minor prophecy, also increasing my critical chance. It contributes to increase my modifier to base damage. So basically, it's like this. The more my base damage is, the higher my crit value becomes. My crit damage becomes, right? So, and that's present. So, basically, my crit damage right now... Ah, shit. Didn't want to do that. I'll wait till that wears off. That's another thing to keep in mind, too. You can use the rearming trap. That gives you minor force. Believe... Yep, increasing your critical damage also. Okay, so my critical damage up here is maxing out at 7.2, right? Question of it is, can I get more damage from that by slotting something else? So we're going to put on the Hulking Draugr. And I'm going to keep the dagger of the Hulking Draugr. And I'm also going to put on the Hulking Draugr bow. Oh. Now we take a look and I'm at an 86 critical chance. Now I can also modify that back into the champion system if I wanted to. So if I wanted to go back up into it and take a look at the diminishing return, I can. But what I want to do is see if I can get past the 7.2. Now, when I go back into the skills, now we're looking at the 5.801. Now we're looking at 7.7 for our critical damage. So as you guys can see, when you stack crit, you lose base damage. That's a diminishing return, right? Those are a diminishing effect. Now, that's not even applying the minor. So when I go over here, and anytime I deal critical, you'll see the icon come up over here, which is another axe. So this is the major savagery. Over here is the minor savagery. That in place puts another critical effect on. Once that's applied... See, it's not going to increase my crit damage. It's just increasing my critical chance, right? So we're looking at 89 with it applied, right? As long as that minor savagery is applied. Now when we take a look up, it drops down 3%. So there you have a 3% loss off of something as simple as that. And the question becomes... how much do you want to take up your crit and how much do you want to raise your base value? Remember, the higher your base value is, the more your crit. Now, you can still use the shadow. So let's say if I wanted, and I don't have the shadow. So say my crit value is up a certain percentage. Let's say we're looking at 60%, 70%. I don't like to go over 60 because my base value drops too much for me. So once you hit up, I'd say about 55, 60, the shadow for trials becomes prominent. It becomes a lot more, especially when the aggressive Warhorn is going to be blown. But stacking too much crit is a very bad thing because it affects the amount that you crit for because you're taking away from the base value of your damage. That is what determines how much you're going to crit for. Right? So even if I go ahead and let's say I don't use the Thief. Let's say I'm running Twiceborn Star. And I'm running a secondary set with crit value. Once my crit hits a certain percentage, do I need the Thief? Absolutely not, because I can use the Shadow and I can use something like the Warrior, thus increasing my base value, increasing my critical damage even further. So once again, guys, this is what I kind of wanted to go into and how diminishing returns are affected in your crit. But, once again, guys, I mean, it's it goes without saying, man. I mean, seriously, you don't want to drop the crit down too low. I always tell people, I always stay between 55.5 and 60, ideally. That's where I like to be. I can increase my critical damage. Thus, and I'm critting over half the time, and I have an insane amount of base damage. So, to me, that's ideal. But if you want to go up to about 70%, you could. If you want to do 80-something%, you can. But this is what I always tell people. Do you want to crit 100% of the time for half amount of the damage that somebody else is doing? That becomes the question. Because somebody else can actually capitalize even more off their damage because they're increasing the base value. And that's why I'm always like, there is the 100% guaranteed is not applied to the base value. And diminishing returns is affected by that. It's the golden rule in all MMOs. It's always going to be the golden rule. You can go ahead and guarantee and stack all your crit, but you're not going to be dealing as much damage as you would think because your base value is low. So there it is, guys. That's how diminishing returns affects critical damage. So I want you guys to kind of process this. If you hate it, that's fine, but you still can't deny the fact. You know, it is what it is. But you know, if basically it's like this, guys, and I'll do this really quick too. You can use the tooltips as a guide. It's kind of what it is. So I'm dealing 5,007 base. That's potential. Now, remind you, I can't actually get 5,007 if I don't have 100% penetration. That value is going to be lost, right? It's going to be completely lost to me. Oh, sorry. So let's say I'll go here, and let's say I go, and I'm going to go pick up this Mundus really quick. I'm going to go pick up the Warrior, and I'll show you the base value increase. No. Get out of that. Okay. Now, I'm going to show this really quick before I grab it. So, 5-7 is my base, right? We're going to pick up the Warrior. Go back into the tooltip. Now my base is 6-2, right? Now, but my critical drop went down to 72. Okay. I think I was dealing with like 77. I would have to take a look again. We'll go back to my little crib real quick. Still researching. It just keeps going. I just click on everything. I'm like, I know where I want to go with this. Now, this isn't ideal. None of this is ideal. Would never run any of the, like, none of this setup in any dungeons or whatever. Okay. So now we're at 8-4 crit. That's our critical damage. Now you see the base, because the 4-8 is how much we're getting through. Okay, so that's the base value because we don't have enough penetration. Right? So what ends up happening, let's go in here. All right. So our critical percentage drops down to 58.3. Our average is 6,873. A max is 8,401. So it's increased. We've increased the base damage amount. The critical rating currently is 72. So even with the lower end, and this is why I'm always telling people the way the critical ratings work isn't ideal to the whatever. Because I'm critting less than the number. Right? So I should be critting like 72, and I would keep going over and over and over and over on that, but I'm always going to be critting less than the number guarantees. So that's why you see this. So we have a 58.3 on critical rating, but my crit value is set up at 72.7. So there's a diminishing effect even within the crit percentage, right? So we'd see that. And the 4.8 is the base without damage, but we've increased the critical damage because we've increased the base value of our ability, right? So that's how that works, right? So there's a happy medium in between it, because you have three different values that have to go into damage calculation. You have penetrating value, you have base value, and then you have critical damage applied. So these values all, you know, are going to determine how much DPS you're going to be dealing. And for me, there's a fine line between that, because I need to deal a considerable amount of base damage to increase my critical damage, but my penetrating value has to be applied. And that's where, like I said, the lover, depending on your crit value, for stamina, is going to be very detrimental depending on your build. A lot of people are going to be like, well, we should run the shadow. Wait a minute, guys. Not necessarily, because if your crit value isn't, if your penetrating value isn't there, you're going to be losing DPS on that. That's going to affect your critical damage as well. So even though Sharpen's got cut in half, the lover for stamina users might be prominent even when you're running the precise value. So once again, guys, this is why I kind of wanted to go over this. I have so many people who want to just go ahead and troll me and act like I don't know what I'm talking about. But I got 20 years doing this, guys. I played so many games that it's ridiculous. And the number one, and like I said, the golden rule in all of it is diminishing returns is always going to affect crit. It's just always going to affect it somewhere, somehow. Believe it. And another thing that you want to take into consideration in anything that you're going to be doing is how your passives affect your damage, because stamina passives for medium and light armor are polar opposites. So my critical chance in my medium armor increases for each piece. So I don't have one light, one heavy. I actually only have one heavy, and I'm running 6 light. The reason being because I can get the dexterity boost, increasing the critical, right? But this is the deal. Agility only applies to 5 or more. I'm already at the max, so my weapon damage will not exceed, but I can get the 2% increase to my health and my stamina and my magicka, thus increasing my resource pool. So this is another thing you got to take in consideration, because when you look at light armor, that it's a whole different beast, because there's no weapon damage. It's the penetrated value for the 5 bonus, and that maxes out 4,884. So, but on the opposite end, you get the recovery and you get the return, the recovery and the reduction in light armor. So it's way different for both classes. So those values are always going to be, you have to take that in consideration, your build and your munduses and how you enchant. But I love it because some specific YouTuber was talking about BIS, or best in slot. This is another reason why you don't have best in slot in this game, because during a linear progression, it's set. If I have a tier 4 and there's a tier 5 set, the reason tier 5 is best in slot because I can't get any higher. But the indifferent variables are controlled. It's controlled variables in this game that determine what your results are going to be. So if I was to take a race like Bosner, I'm going to have a higher end recovery. So basically, it's taking a look at my enchantments then. So if I have only, let's say I have 2 recovery enchantments, the Bosner might not need any because they have that. So they can increase their damage by putting on the increase damage, the increase to 174, where any, like something like maybe like the Red Guard doesn't have that. Red Guard doesn't have as much, so they might need 2 more recovery. So there is no best class, there is no best in slot. It is how you build your character. These are the sandbox elements that's been applied to this game. So once again, guys, just to kind of digest this, if you like it, please give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, please post below. I want to thank everybody for watching today. And once again and always, thank you and have a nice day.